All right, let's just jump right in. For, well, centuries, the entire global financial system has been built on one single idea: trust. But what if that whole concept was actually flawed from the very beginning? Today, we're going to look at how a brand new model, something called zero trust, is completely tearing up the rulebook and reinventing what trust even means in finance.
And this is the core idea that just flips everything on its head. In this new world, believing a client is safe is seen as a vulnerability, a bug in the system just waiting to be exploited. So the goal isn't to trust people anymore, it's to perpetually verify them. It is a radical, radical shift, so let's unpack how we even got to this point. To really get why this revolution is happening right now, we first have to look at the old system it's replacing. We've got to expose the fatal flaw that was baked right into the way compliance has always been done.
Okay, so look at the left side here. That's the old way, the legacy model. A bank runs a check on a new client, and if they pass, boom, their status is trusted. And it stays that way until the next review, maybe a year from now. But the zero trust model on the right, totally different. A client is never trusted. They are only ever conditionally cleared, meaning they're safe for this transaction at this exact moment based on data that's coming in right now. The second that's over, the system basically assumes they're already a risk again.
And this gets to the absolute core problem of the old system. Some people call it the data ghost. This is that dangerous time lag, the gap between something changing with a client. Let's say they hire a new director with some really shady connections, and the bank actually finding out about it months later during a manual review. In that gap, the ghost of their old trusted profile is what the bank sees. But the reality? The reality is something much, much riskier.
So how do you fight a data ghost? Well, you build an engine that never, ever sleeps. And this brings us right to the technology at the heart of this whole thing, the Perpetual Know Your Customer Engine, or pKYC. This is the always-on solution to that data latency problem. So instead of just sitting around waiting for clients to send in documents, this engine is constantly pulling information from countless sources. It's tapping into things like LEI Connect, which is kind of like a real-time global phone book for companies, just to verify who owns what. It's using natural language processing to scan news all over the world, figuring out the difference between a minor lawsuit and a serious money laundering charge. And this is the really cool part. It uses something called graph analytics to find connections that are basically invisible to the human eye.
Okay, so what's so special about graph analytics? It's all about seeing hidden relationships. So imagine your client hires a new director. A human analyst might check that director's name, see nothing, and move on. But the graph can see that this new director also sits on the board of another, separate company, which is secretly owned by a sanctioned person. That's a two-step connection that someone just looking at a flat PDF document would almost certainly miss. The machine, though, it sees it in a split second. Probably the best way to visualize how all this data comes together is to think of pKYC as a risk thermostat. We're not talking about those old, clunky, high, medium, or low risk ratings anymore. This is a dynamic, living score that's constantly changing. And look at how this actually works. The system gives every client a really granular risk score, let's say on a scale from 0 to 1,000. A small event, like a change in a director who isn't really involved in day-to-day stuff, might just nudge the temperature up by like 2 points. But a high-risk transaction to a sensitive part of the world, that could instantly spike the score by 50 points. Every single piece of data is a signal that adjusts that thermostat, up or down, in real time.
So what happens when that temperature gets too high? Well, there's a critical number programmed into the system. Let's say, for this bank, it's 700. If a client's risk score ever hits that number, the system automatically sounds the alarm. Certain activities, like outgoing international payments, might be frozen on the spot, and there's no manual override. Nothing moves until a human compliance officer has to step in and figure out what's going on. It's basically a kill switch.
Now, this isn't just some abstract system humming away on a server somewhere. It has massive, real-world consequences. Let's take a look at how zero trust is literally becoming the new gatekeeper for global trade. You see, as global trade goes digital, that old piece of paper, the bill of lading, the key document for any shipment, is being replaced by an electronic bill of lading, or EBL. But here's the problem. How do you secure a digital file that can be copied a million times, or easily altered? How do you really know the people involved in the trade are legit?
The pKYC engine performs what's called an instant triangulation the very moment an EBL gets uploaded. First, it does an identity check. Is the company receiving the goods who they say they are? Second, an activity check.
Does this shipment of, say, microchips actually match their normal business? And third, a geography check. Is the ship's route what you'd expect, or is it taking a weird, suspicious detour? If those 3 points don't line up perfectly, the system can block the trade at the port right then and there. Of course, this level of automated control brings us to the most important part of this whole conversation. What does all this mean for us, for people, for our privacy, and for the professionals whose entire careers are built around this?
And this is the elephant in the room, isn't it? This push towards perpetual monitoring is an incredibly powerful tool for catching bad guys for sure, but it also creates this massive surveillance net over every single client. So where do you draw the line between security and just surveillance?
This creates some huge ethical knots to untangle. You've got privacy laws like GDPR that are built on data minimization, meaning only collect what you absolutely need. How does that work with a system designed to watch everything, all the time? And beyond that, if an algorithm freezes a billion-dollar deal, regulators and clients now have what's called a right to explanation. Banks have to be able to explain why the AI made its decision, which is why this new field of explainable AI, or XAI, is becoming so critical.
What's crystal clear from all of this is that the old way of doing things is officially done. For the professionals in this field, the job has fundamentally changed. The era of just ticking boxes on a checklist, well, that's over, forever.
And what that means is that the compliance officer of the future has to be a hybrid of different roles. They have to be part data analyst to understand how these risk thermostats are even built. They need to be part investigator to follow the complex breadcrumb trails that graph analytics uncovers. And they absolutely have to be part strategist to understand the geopolitical shifts that can make a country's risk score change overnight.
Which leaves us with one final huge question. We started this whole conversation with the idea that trust was a bug. But if every single transaction, every connection, and every identity is constantly being verified by a machine, what does it even mean to trust someone anymore? In a world built on total verification, what is the new definition of trust?